Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of The Fourth Wave in Therapy. And I am absolutely delighted today to reconnect with someone that it's probably been about a decade since we crossed each other's paths. And I want to introduce you to Kerry Neilson. Now, she prefers to go by Keza, so we will call her that today. Keza is a quantum empowerment and transformation coach and guides healers, therapists, and mental health professionals to deepen their spiritual practice and expand their consciousness. We're going to have such a great conversation today. Now, I'm not going to give too much away about Keza's personal journey because we are going to talk about that and really what sort of sparked her own profound awakening. But her work is grounded in heart-brain coherence, energy psychology, which we love, quantum principles, and she draws from amazing speakers and leading edge thinkers such as our good friend, Dr. Joe Dispenza, Dr. Teresa Bullard White, and lots of other people such as Andrew Newberg, and we're going to get into it. We are going to talk at the end about Keza's course that she does have available, and it is something that I'll give you a little sneak peek, everybody. It is called Wired for Wonder, the brain, the soul, and the choice to change. So we'll talk about that at the end, so please stay tuned so you can get all the details. And of course, if you want to contact Keza, her details, full bio in the notes below. Welcome to the Fourth Wave in Therapy.
Thank you very much, Peter. I'm delighted to be here. When you said the name of the course, Wired for Wonder, I went, yes, that was like an Archimedes bathtub experience.
Amazing. We are going to get to that. So I'm going to get you to put a pin in that one for a minute because I really want to dive into the juiciness of really what led to the creation of that course and lots of other masterclasses and things that you've got. But could we start just with sort of a high level question, if you like? And maybe just sort of opening with, you and I crossed paths in the education space many, many years ago where we were running an EFT trial for high achieving year 10 students in the school that you were at the time. And of course, we can link to that publication if anyone wants to read it. But talking about your journey and stepping out of that, but maybe what you've been experiencing, from a cultural point of view about the glorification of change, driving change. Are we getting it fundamentally wrong as a society and a culture? And the world is your oyster here. Happy for you to share anything
thanks,
you like.
Peter. Well, my short answer is yes. I spent nearly
yes, we're getting it wrong.
Definitely getting it wrong. And I think that's no surprise to any of our listeners. The whole world is now looking at slow pace, slow fashion, slow, retreats. And I think that's because we are probably overwhelming our nervous systems. I mean, there's so much out there that tells us we are. And having worked in government for nearly 50 years, it's so funny, isn't it? On the one hand, the government is a dinosaur that moves extremely slowly. It plods along. But on the other hand, it's telling us to drive change. KPIs, what growth are we getting? It's just all plodding along here, but telling us to go fast, telling us to improve at all costs, telling us to drive the kids. And having worked in school as a school counsellor, the stresses on these kids is overwhelming. Their parents are stressed for a whole lot of different reasons. So what I can tell you is that in my own recovery and healing journey, I spent about 10 years doing CBT, REBT, ACT, all the T's, and I did course after course after course. Now, I've got to say to you, those courses were great. They kept me sober for about a week. There was no transformation. And I was a driver to change myself, but I couldn't. And transformation came when I threw myself on the floor in a rehab in desperation on my knees, and I just put my hands up and said, if you're there, you've got to help me. because if you don't, I'm out of here today. And I don't really know what I meant by that, but it wasn't leaving the rehab in full body. And that was surrender.
Let's yeah, and I know you've given me permission to really talk about this today, because your personal, your personal awakening, you know, if you like, in that moment, which was in rehab, and it was for alcoholism, and it was for, obviously, you know, that pattern of behavior. And like you said, you've tried a lot of the T's, a lot of the gold standard evidence-based approaches that we're told and have got research behind them. But there was something about a Gestalt therapy moment, wasn't there, in that? Can you tell us a little bit about what happened that day?
So the first thing is I was in the rehab for a total of 8 weeks. And this happened about 3, maybe 4 weeks into that stay. So I'd already, you know, the Gestalt therapist ran a group, basically from 9 to 3:30 every day of the week. So by the time he facilitated the Gestalt experiment for me, I was very comfortable with him. I was very comfortable in the group. So the first thing I'm going to say is, even though I had a very traumatized nervous system from early childhood trauma, plus the trauma I created through my alcoholism, there was a lot of safety and support and connection. So that was a very important external condition. So I trusted. And I was powerless. I'd admitted my powerlessness. I had completely surrendered, and I just allowed the process to happen. So I forget the question now. Sorry. I think you asked me.
No. No, because I know in your mind you've definitely got that memory happening for you. In that moment of, in the notes that you gave me, you said, and I really like this, in the exact moment you knew it was over, meaning the addiction, a crack of thunder broke through a cloudless sky and the hospital lights went out. Oh, I have goosebumps as I'm reading this. This was 1995, and you haven't had a drink since. When you look back at that moment, what do you think happened? So you surrendered, you were on your knees, and you went, if somebody's listening, something's listening. What do you think happened?
Well, my own belief is that the divine, the quantum field, the quantum, the creator, the great spirit, whatever we want to call that power that is greater than us, definitely answered my prayer. Because I hadn't actually done any Gestalt work in the group for a while. And so we went into the group, and straight away, the Gestalt therapist, Joe, looked at me and said, Kerry, are you ready to do some work? So that was amazing. He would have used some sort of creative tool. All I know is that I was standing there, I listened to him, and next thing, I definitely was in a cave, a dark cave. It was lined with fire torches, and straight ahead of my father. And I think I say to you, he was probably my greatest agent of change. He was my nemesis. And the whole even talking to you, I get a bit teary. The whole relationship between him and I had always been him speaking at me and not allowing me to speak. So I never was heard by him. I was very frustrated. But he listened. We actually engaged. And I had compassion, I had empathy, I had a little bit of love, I had understanding. And he said those final words to me, which were, you don't get it. I have no power over you except the power you give to me. And that's when I got the aha moment. Crack of thunder outside. I felt this power. I still can feel it. come up through the ground, up through my feet, up through my whole body, and out the crown of my head. And that's when Joe Duff, the Gestalt therapist, went, "Oh my God," because the lights went out. And then I went, "It's done." And the lights came on. It was only later I went, "That's quite a biblical metaphor, isn't it? It's done."
Yeah. Yes.
So, you know,
Lights went out.
I've always thought it was very quantum, but I've also really been, because I have friends who are very into science. I'm not, but yeah. I wonder if it can be explained through science. And of course it can be. We have that bridge between spirituality and not necessarily classical physics either, or even quantum physics and mechanics. You know, we've got, as you know, Jim Doty, Andrew Newberg, Cindy Wigglesworth, Jeffrey Schwartz. They're the ones that I've sort of pulled together, where they actually all have their different terminologies to explain what happened, Peter, but really it's talking about the same stuff.
And at some level, if we were to use the umbrella term of they're all kind of researching from a neuroscience point of view, some sort of meditative sort of state, that's where they're all coming from, isn't it? And they've all had, you know, lots of their own experiences. We'll make sure those names are below if anyone wants to explore their work. But there's something, and I just want to come back. You're absolutely right that science can explain what happened to you in that moment. We now have more sophisticated imaging equipment to be able to sort of, you know, measure that. Joe Dispenza does it in live sessions where we can see gamma brainwave states occur for people. That coincides with what you talked about, often some sort of imagery or vision or someone appearing to them, and then a behavior. It's almost like a DNA upgrade,
Yes.
isn't it? Everything gets upgraded in the body. And alcohol wasn't part of that for you. Yeah, the craving.
No, it's, you know, I've read different things about, perhaps it's Jim Doty who talks about, you know, going in and somehow through the trust, the surrender, the allowing, compassion arises. And I think either he or Wigglesworth who says compassion is the highest, it's above love. It's the highest frequency in my terminology. And he just said, you know, well, the brain will change with that. It slows down the nervous system. It opens our heart, the connections between the heart and the brain, everything slows down. So I read somewhere where it says it's where the mystical meets measurement. We can actually measure and get some strategies, and that's what this is about, to actually do it on purpose. I think the key point, though,
and it really is the science of transformation, isn't it?
Go ahead.
Yeah, the science of transformation, like it really is the transformative process has that explanation. And when you were saying compassion, it really made me think self-compassion towards the self plays such a role in that, not just towards other people.
And that brings me to this point. When I'm reading the researchers, it's all about having compassion for others. They do mention self-compassion. They do mention self-love. But I've got to say to you, the greatest compassion and love in my experience was actually for myself.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah.
It's almost like Dad might have given you that gift in that moment, didn't he? Like Dad was the one that in your vision kind of said, I don't have any power over you. You're giving me power.
And in life, he was a tyrant. And I'm not the only one who said it. He himself suffered terribly with mental illness and with alcoholism. So the fact that he was the giver of that gift of grace was significant.
Yeah, I love that. The gift of grace in that
Mm.
moment. Yeah, that's amazing. So, as we often think of transformation as some sort of exciting, empowering process, but it's not always the case for people, going through change. We talk about just change. Humans, by basic nature, don't really like change. They like things stable, consistent, Groundhog Day kind of thing. So it can be deeply destabilizing, is the word that you've used. I know that, in a trauma informed approach, whether we're as a therapist or, we're standing in front of a classroom, whatever, what is it that people maybe listening in that want to seek their own journey of change? And that could be joining you, that could be doing their own work. What do they need to know about this transformation
Yes.
change process?
Well, a very good point, Peter, because I don't know the people who are coming, if they're coming to the course or doing it through some other means or with some other person. I think that if you know that you've got, the three classic mental health things, substance abuse disorder, anxiety or depression, and to what severity, if you've sought treatment, and you know that your nervous system is fragile, you definitely need to have one of those external conditions I talked about of safety and support, and where you can connect to somebody who is a carer for you or a support person or an ally through the journey. That's really important because you're right. We know that says the brain doesn't like to change. It likes stability, and the fragile nervous system can freak out a little bit. So those things are really important.
And I guess knowing that up front, that if in that change process someone was to kind of encounter any need for more stabilization, but also that, oh, it's not as exciting and empowering as I thought it might be. That probably is quite typical though, isn't it? Like that's a sign that really change and uncomfortableness. Yeah.
And I think I definitely had that. So I think the really important part is that release that I experienced and the freedom that I experienced through that, I'm going to call it mystical experience in rehab. Look, I tell you what, if I hadn't continued with my support person, my therapist, I would have been back on the bottle in a week because it was just the motivator for change, the encouragement to change. But I spent another 2 years in the transformation process, and that was hard. It was really hard because I had changed my identity. I had to continue changing it. So I had to keep rewiring the brain through habits and doing things over and over and over again. And, we know about brain loops, just feeling stuck, feeling, I can't do this. That whole ego, as Cindy Wigglesworth says, the ego sort of versus the spirit and the spiritual intelligence. So the spirituality became my core. If you imagine like a concrete pillar, that was my spirituality. I hung on for dear life. Now, I had some moments where I felt panicky.
Yeah. It's amazing, isn't it? It's to hear a lot of, and I obviously talking to Andrew Newberg, but doing a lot of research in the mystical experiences spaces just with some of my students. People talk about a common characteristics of what you've talked about today, that often the spark of change, it's not necessary for change, but it's often common, isn't it, that a mystical experience of
Yes,
some sort can precipitate that, sort of whole
yes,
process.
absolutely. But the real
Yeah.
and all the research is that the real transformation comes from continuing and embedding and rewiring and repeating. I think it's Jeffrey Schwartz, isn't it, who has the 4-step process for OCD and addiction,
Yes.
all the reads,
Yep.
repeating, repeating, repeating the practice. And then suddenly
Yeah.
we can,
Yeah. And I'm glad you mentioned that.
yeah,
Yeah. Yes. It is suddenly, isn't it? But you've had all these years paving the way for
yeah,
the suddenly to actually happen. I'm glad you mentioned the bit about identity change because, particularly, I know from the addiction research, there is a lot of evidence to suggest that when someone is shifting those addictive behaviors through whatever means, unless there's a true identity shift of I no longer identify as that person. I'm not necessarily just recovered, but I'm not that person, that often that change doesn't stick. That, yeah, there's some even Australian researchers that have said the same, that truly can't live in the
yeah.
same neighbourhood, can't necessarily, do the same job, can't have the same haircut. Identity shift. Did you find that you mentioned that you did have to do that as well, that was a really valuable part of, I guess, the whole
I
puzzle?
think I think that experience was so pivotal in so many ways, and I did see myself differently. I felt myself loved, protected, and accepted and changed by the divine. And that was huge. That was the
Mm.
basic thing I needed because up until then I was full of shame, self loathing, um, bitterness, hatred. So that was massive. And that's why I guess spirituality became
Yes.
that concrete pillar inside. But yes, I did go through identity change. And, in AA, which I was in for a little while, it talks about you need to change people, places, and things. And I guess that's what they're really saying is you need to change your identity, what you do, who you hang with, and your hobbies and leisure activities. And that probably does slowly change.
Yeah, yeah, it's all,
Yeah,
yeah, that association. So classical conditioning is so strong in all of us as well. So tell me, I'm really excited to dive and unpack a little bit about now where you're at. So 1995 happens, journey of transformation, change for yourself. You've stepped out of now the education world in those roles. And of course, we do now get to hear about Wired for Wonder. So you've spent years, I guess, in the learning process with all of these greats that are out there and what they've studied and what they've researched. But you've pulled together now a course which is very much about the brain, the soul, and the choice to change. It seems like a perfect time to kind of, have all this come together, not only in your own life, but for where we are too. Like we opened with that, where are we in society kind of thing. What is it that people are seeking? So tell us a little bit about how did it come together, and now what is it that you're offering to the world?
so how it came together was through me, I, that bridge between the science and spirituality. And, as I said before, looking at how the mystical can be measured. And of course, that led me to all of these researches. And so, not everyone is going to have, as you noted, Peter, uh, an incredible transformation spontaneously. And whilst that's lovely and wonderful, as we both said, it's not going to last unless we do the real transformation. So I went through years of therapy. I had a lot to unpack. I was 38 when I recovered. And I got to the stage further down the track where I went, well, I've had all of this processing. It's all flowed. I know a lot about depth psychology, but what's the science behind what happened? And another Archimedes bathtub moment, I I had this incredible insight. And this was about 2 years ago. And I had nothing to connect it with at that time, but it was a unique mechanism of choose, imagine, connect, transform. So I was so I've researched that for the last 2 years. And of course, it's supported by so many of these researchers. And as Jeffrey Schwartz says, it's all transformation, change in the brain happens from attention, focus, and intention or choice. And he says choice starts all. You've got to choose to change. And my surrender and allowance was my signature choice point.
Yeah.
So
I'm guessing the pillars then, are those 4 ideas, aren't they? The pillars of the program and ultimately the bigger picture of
and I
change.
talk about it as being, I've got, graphics, image. So I talk about this 4-stage being a spiral, but it spirals upwards. And it's not linear. We can come in at any point, but we're always, if we're doing the work, spiraling upwards. And I give some information, psychoeducation and strategies around how to deal with the stuck points and the loops. And they all come from a wide range of factors, but experiences, my experiences, other people's experiences. But it's choosing every day.
Amazing. Yeah, absolutely. And I'm glad the visual is like going up is almost transcending beyond ourselves as well, isn't it? Like to me, that imagery of, kind of, sort of going to that next level within our own, I think of Maslow's hierarchy of really that, self-transcendence really that other researchers have added to the top of self-actualization. It's like transcending beyond ourselves. Yeah, I love that imagery of that. So tell me, how long does the course go for in duration?
There's a short course. There's a 4-week course. And then there's a longer extended program. And I also, within that, offer one-to-one coaching for those people who just want to get right into it a bit deeper. It's supported by an ebook. It's supported by a webinar. So, and I start with a masterclass. So, I'm so excited about this. I just
and tell us
can
where
I just
can
go back?
I know why
really exciting, Peter.
Yes.
Have you have the listeners seen or heard of Cindy Wiggleworth's SQ21 model? It's fantastic. It's got the 4 categories of spiritual, and we can measure them and improve them. And it's a wonderful, wonderful tool. So I also refer to that in the master.
Amazing. Well, there's a link.
It's wonderful.
Fabulous. Yeah. How wonderful. Wired for Wonder, everybody. Where can we find you at Keza?
So my website is kerryneilson.com.au.
How wonderful. We'll make sure that there is absolutely a link below, everybody, in case you're curious at whatever point in time you might be listening to this and deciding, maybe I've had a transformational moment and want to fully understand that a little bit more, or I know that maybe I need some assistance here to, have that support during the change process. Because, we all go through different seasons of life, don't we? And sometimes we need to shed the old, for the new to come in.
Peter. Great to hear you say that. Because you're such, as I said to you, you're an elite leader in science of transformation, and it's such an honour for me to be here with you today because, leaders. You're one of them.
Thank you, Kerry. I think sometimes it just happens. So we maybe didn't set the intention all the time, but at the same time, my own change process absolutely has been a journey as well. You know, maybe I should record an episode on that at some point in my life, because I think what people might see, they don't realize the work that you're doing behind closed doors. And I tell you, the work never stops. So whilst, you know, we research certain techniques, I'm a believer in throw everything at it.
Yeah, me too. I just got goosebumps when you said maybe you should record your own story. I'm still goosebumps.
Yeah. Okay.
So I think you need to do it. I'd certainly be up for listening.
Okay, it's all right. Yes, and I'm sure a few listeners would go, I didn't know that. Okay, it's on the list. I promise everybody. I'll do that.
Right.
Amazing. That's wonderful. It is my own journey, absolutely is how I found the transformation tool of EFT, but also neuro-linguistic programming. Way back in the day, in my early 20s, I was looking to personally do some change work. I wasn't really looking for my clients. That is how those tools came across in my life. You know, Louise Hay, meditations or visualizations, guided imagery, timeline therapy. All of the stuff that was outside the norm back then was purely because, yeah, I was hunting around looking in the local library in the CD cassettes. What can I listen to and borrow? So, yeah, that was absolutely me in my early 20s.
And I have one question to ask you. What do you...
Absolutely.
A lot of psychologists, at least, having an underlying spirituality that guides them in their personal lives and work.
Yeah, I don't know whether I would know how many psychologists have that. It's certainly not something that may be raised as a topic in training and teaching. So it's certainly like, I don't think it's something that enters the education system where it's posed as, hey, have you got a spiritual practice to cope with what you're going to do for a living here or what you're choosing as a path? I would say the colleagues around myself, you know, Yale's famous paper titled, you know, Birds of a Feather Flock Together. So the 6 people that really are the greatest influence on yourself or who you talk to the most are very similar to you. And I would absolutely say that's me in my life, that the PhD students I attract, if we use that language, to want to do a PhD with me, no matter what topic, are all the same as me. So they may not be exploring EFT, they might be exploring a different topic, but we have these conversations there. So it's funny, you know, the students you end up supervising and guiding are the ones that have exactly the same kind of approach. And you do have these conversations, you know, and you have teary moments where you're talking about people's lives that you're supporting. So I would absolutely say my spiritual journey started in my teenage years. So whilst I had a traditional religious upbringing, and part of that was in Catholicism, and I played the organ at church for 20 years of my life. I'm like, I've got a ticket to heaven, I tell you, playing the organ. I walked away from the traditional Catholic upbringing in my 20s, but I certainly didn't walk away from spirituality, that it absolutely played a role. And I absolutely remember sitting in therapy with clients opposite me, and I worked in the addiction space, eating disorders, sitting there, and I'm like 21, and I have no idea what to say to the client, really don't have much training background. And I remember sitting there, I don't know who I was talking to, but I'm kind of in my mind looking up going, you need to give me an idea here because I've got NFA. NFI. I've got no effing idea of what to say here. And having a channel come through and an idea that would just pop to mind, and I'd go, so, and the client would just go, why did you ask me that? And that would be the piece that needed to be unraveled or whatever. So I don't know. I didn't learn that at university. I was just sitting there going, I've got to have something to do.
But I suspect that.
Yeah. So there you go. I absolutely have to do that. I'll do that episode.
Do it. I love that.
That's amazing.
I've got goosebumps again.
I will. That's fabulous. Kerry, Keza, it's been just wonderful to connect with you again. And you are the reason we started the EFT research in schools, because it was your conversation with me about, hey, do we think we could help these students, which then snowballed, a whole kind of not only field of research with students, but training of teachers worldwide in classroom tapping and things like that. And people might not realize that you are the person that started that here, on the Gold Coast with me. So I bless you for that door that you opened, which I didn't know the other journey that you were going on at the time, which I'm so glad you've shared with us today.
Thank you so much, Peta. I'm blessed and honoured. Thank you.
Amazing. And everybody, I encourage you to have a look in the show notes below and go and connect with Keza, and absolutely have a look at the 4-week program or the longer. If you're curious and interested and maybe want to take that next step in your own personal development journey, it's always wonderful, I think, to share with someone who has had those experiences, because you don't feel alone, or that to know that these things are possible. So absolute pleasure, Keza, and look forward to sharing that episode that you've now got me committed to recording about my own transformation journey.
Great. Thanks, Peta. Bye.